All right. Good evening, everyone. Okay, my name is Knight. My Chinese name is Zhang Jingyuan. So I'm currently a freelance mobile application designer and developer. Uh, I used to work as a creative trainer for an innovation company that invents many revolutionary products and services. I also graduated with an art and technology degree in China and US. So my high purpose is always trying to help people to learn how to creatively and effectively using the technology that enrich people's life. So I will strive to share some of my experience and thoughts about how to using some of the useful technology that iOS to develop great apps. So, from previous CocoaHeads talk, we actually have shared some of the simple techniques that create UI components in an easy way. So if you want to refer to that, you can go back to our CocoaHeads slides to see what we have shared before. But as you all might know, that UI is part of the iOS development. The other important part about development is the data, especially for data persistence. So there are multiple ways and options that it can persist data in iOS devices. So some of the options you might already know. For iOS, we have NS user default. You can also archive and archive the encoded objects. Also, you can directly write SQL code talking to your SQLite database on our devices. And some of you might also already use some third-party solution like Chrome, Hibernate, and so on. Those third-party solutions have great advantages to adopt a multi-platform in a very consistent way. But if you want to develop iOS app and want to use a designated solution that provides from Apple, then Core Data is the one to go. So what is Core Data anyway? So this is by Apple's definition. It's a bit long, I'll just read it for you. So Core Data is a framework that lets you use to manage the model layer objects in your application. It provides generalized and automated solutions to common tasks associated with object lifecycle and object graph management, including persistence. The core data will typically decrease by 50 to 60%, 70% the amount of code you write to support the model layer. I know it's long, but generally speaking, that if using core data, you can handle data persistence very efficiently on iOS. It's a powerful framework. But are you using core data? So let me ask a question. How many of you have used or are using core data in your current or previous project? Oh, many of you. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so how many of you have heard of the core data but never used it in your current project? Okay, and why?
Because I'm a good engineer.
Because you're an engineer. Okay, you're Android engineer. And any other reason?
Someone told me it's bad.
Someone called you it's bad?
Yeah, on Twitter.
Oh. Okay. But yeah, so I have thought about this question before also. So from my personal experience, there are some challenges that will prevent people from using core data. So there's a top 3 that I think from my personal experience. One is that core data do require a developer to have a learning curve to be able to use that in a proper way. Because even a developer have experience on iOS, he or she still needs time to learn how to use core data. And also, to implement core data into a current project, some of the work might be a bit tedious, such as there is a core data stack. You used to have to write a lot of code to implement a core data stack into a project. So if you're not handled properly, that would be very tedious. Also, because core data is about data model, so to be able to work with a business model, developer also need to take effort to design the data model and also handle the migration between version of builds. So that's sort of the challenges that I think why people were not using core data. So that's why today we give a simple techniques to get started with core data. So some of you might if you have already used Core Data before, I hope that today's talk will be a refresh. And if you've never used Core Data, I hope that today's talk will get you started. So important to note is that because Core Data is a very dynamic framework, so there are different ways to use Core Data by different developers. And since in 2016, WWDC 2016, that Apple actually refined Core Data framework, so now you can have a very easy start with Core Data. So today I'm going to just show you one of the easiest way. Of course, if you want to learn more advanced way to use Core Data, I will provide some resource later in this keynote. So what do we do today? Our live coding demo. I will do a live demo in code to show you how to implement Core Data into the project, so that will ease your learning curve. And also, we'll show you some simple APIs about Core Data, so that you'll feel that it's a more straightforward experience rather than a tedious experience. I'm also going to show you a bit about migration, so that you can play with more about Core Data and learn less about some of the issues that you might experience. So, to better understand today's demo, I hope that you might know that some of the UI basics and also the Swift basics, such as what a table view is, how to use it, and how to have, how about in the UI storyboard, and how to navigate the controllers by using that controller. And some of the also important to note about protocol and Swift extension. So to prepare, before we started, also do a final preparation, because Core Data is a very dynamic framework, there are also some terminologies in the Core Data. So we're just briefly introduce you before we start the project. And also we'll also explain the technology during our live code. And if you find it difficult to follow the code, don't worry, because the code will be pushed to GitHub. So later on, you can just download the code, the live demo code, and then play that later for free. Yeah. So here are the core technologies, core terminology that I'll be using in today's demo. I will just briefly overview it very quickly. So the first is a persistent container. As I said, developer used to have to write a very tedious Core Data stack code for incorporating Core Data into the project. But now the persistent container basically just wrap everything, and you can just write a very simple code and implement into the Core Data, into the project. So I'll show that in the live demo later. And also the NSManage object. This is actually a generic class that implements all the basic behavior required by a Core Data model. This is almost like your NS object in your iOS frameworks, but using Core Data, basically a subclass that manage object. But in the latest implementation of Core Data, you don't even have to create or subclassing the manage object. You basically just create those entities in the Core Data model editors, and it will be automatically generated for you. So we'll have our Core Data model editors, basically a graphic tool in Xcode for you to configure the Core Data model. This is also the important thing, is an NSManage context in Xcode, in iOS, that when you use in Core Data, you don't have to deal with all those things, because NSManage context is the thing that you will interact most when you are working with iOS to deal with Core Data. So basically, this is an object represents a single object space or scratchpad that you can use to fetch, create, and save manage objects. So before you save the manage object context, everything will be in this context. So like some of the application, you can redo or undo the actions. Basically is doing on the manage object context. Okay. Also have fetch result controller. You can use that to go with your table view. And also a delegate for the fetch result controller. So basically helping us to inform UI table view to update all the data that was returned from the fetch result controller. So finally, we'll have a lightweight protocol migration. Because if you change data model between two versions, sometimes it might cause your app to crash when launch. So now the core data is supporting lightweight. You always support lightweight migration, but now you have a simple line of code for automatically migration the data model between versions. So we're about to start, and again, if you find hard to follow, the code is on GitHub, or a give you a link to the GitHub so you can download code yourself. So again, thank you, Mattbox, for a beautiful arena. Also, I want to thank Core and Guangshan for support to invest with very good host, CocoaHeads. So now let's get started. We're defining a goal, and our goal is to create an app. This app will have three major views. So the purpose of this app is because this is a note. It's a note app. In the first screen, we'll have a table view that will show a list of notes. And in the second view, basically you can just create a notes and you put a title into this view. So it'll save as a title of the note. We'll also show you a date label, which basically shows a timestamp of the creation at the time of when this note is created. Later, we have also there is also a view that we can just tap the row and see the detail of the notes. We can also edit the time as well as the title. There is also a feature that we can just swipe to delete the note. But the most important thing is that all those data is stored locally on devices. So even if you turn off the app and go back to the background, or even close the app, when you relaunch it, these data will be stored and it was backed by core data. So let's get started. So this is our project. Let me just give you an overview for what we have in this project. So let's first start to run the project in our simulator to see what we have, to see what we have right now. Next time we have a more stronger handle. Okay, so let me just give the overview for what we have. Okay, so in our project we have very simple structure. We have our storyboard, which contains our three views. We have a table view, which is backed by our main view controller class. We also have a view that is backed by a new node view controller. Basically, this is our view that we can create our node. We also have an edit node view controller that we can edit our nodes. So we actually run our project because now it's still a template project. Basically, we can just tap the button to show the view. You can dismiss that and tap to detail, but there's no anything stored by core data. So also, looking at our class, we have our main view controller class. These are all the boiler code that handle navigation between views. We also have a table view delegate and also the table view data source. This is just a very basic thing to install the table view. We also have some callbacks from our new node view controller, which allow the main view controller to dismiss those views. The new node view controller, as you can see, we have those callback protocol defined. We have some very simple example code there. We have some code to handle actions. The edit node view controller, just very simple template. We also have some extension to help us to make the process more efficient. We have this perform fetch, wrap it into a do catch. Also, we have save our contacts, wrapping our extension. I'll explain that later during the process. We also created a data controller, which actually is a wrapper for a persistent container. As you might remember, that a persistent container basically wraps everything for us, just like what we used to use for the core data stack. We also have 2 lines of code that will handle, inside the initializer, will handle the auto migration. We'll share that later. And once the data model is, once the persistent container is initialized, we will call the complete closure. So now let's get started. So the first thing we do is let's create our data model. So now the app doesn't have anything about the core data. So how can we incorporate a new model? We can go to the file, menu file, and we'll be able to see there's a core data model here. So we just create that. We can name it as anything. Just put a simple way, just call it data model. I'll just type create. So this is the model editors. So the good thing about this is that once you define the entities inside of this, it's basically just like you create a class in your code. So you don't have to subclass those objects, but you can still do that if you want to. So let's add an entities. So entity basically is your class. So since we're creating note, we just call it note. We can also put our attributes. It's basically referred to your properties. So let's just create a very simple time and define its data type as date. Okay. All right, so it's very important that when incorporating core data, it should be available at the very beginning when the app is launched. So the good place to start is in app delegate. So we just put refer to our data controller that we used to create and try to initialize that in our did finish launch with options. So we have to initialize that. So this line of code will initialize our data controller. And if you look at initializer, basically this is what we have here from here. So inside the initializer, we will also initialize our data persistent container. So here we'll just put a name, a data model. This is the same name as the name we created for this file. So it'll be the same. And also we'll load up persistent store. Because core data is able to connect to multiple different types of storage, such as SQLite or others, but as default, it will connect to SQLite. Once you get initialized, you will actually get return from description. Description is basically NS persistent store description. This is how you want to treat. For this description, you can set different values to let iOS know that how you want to treat those persistent storage. So we have an error, which is print out. If we don't have an error, we continue. So now let's run our app, just to make sure that we don't everything just set up very easily, very correctly. So we run the app, and we see the console, and we see this line. This is the same line that in this app delegate. That means that we already initialized the data controller by core data. So we installed core data into our app. So this is one wrapper and container that you can install core data to your project. So let's continue. All right. So as you might know, that later we actually will see all the nodes in our table view. We then need to configure our table view. So this is our main view controller. Let's add some property to it. We have 2 very important properties here. So now we have a fetch result controller. This is how we deal with use core data to handle to use core data with table view. We also need to have manage object context because this is actually the scratch pad we use a lot in core data. But now it's going to just give us warning because whenever reference to core data frameworks, so we just import our core data frameworks, and this just satisfied our compiler. But anyway, we still need to initialize our manage object context. So let's put our code to initialize that. So we're going to set up our manage context. And this method is basically retrieving the data controller that we have in our app delegate. Remember that in our app delegate, we have our property, the data controller, and inside the data controller, we have our persistent container. And persistent container is everything you need to have in the latest core data. So if we go back to our code, there is a property called view context, so you can get your managed object context. And we set that to our local properties. And we just make sure we call this method to set it up. Of course, it's also important to initialize our fetch result controller because now we are using that to work with table view. We need to tell core data which kind of object do we want to retrieve. So we will have. We initialize our fetch result controller with nodes. So we'll create a request, and we have tell them that we want to sort by time, and we just put a sort descriptor in the request. And we ask if we have the managed object context there. So if there, so we just use iflet to catch it, and then we initialize our fetch result controller by using request and our managed object context. Also, we want to set delegate for our fetch result controller, and we'll perform an initial fetch. This is the code that we wrap it in our extension. And later, we just refresh our table view. We still have something to do to satisfy the controller. Let's just first do it with our table view, because we don't have our table defined here. So let's just put over here. We have our RV outlet. Of course, we need to connect that from our storyboard to our view. So we just connect to it. There we go. We also have to satisfy this line. This is actually asking our main event controller to become the delegate for the fetch result controller. So a good place to do is to set up to create an extension for that. So we have fetch result delegate. Here we're just using a boilercode from Apple's documentation, which is data delegate. There's a lot of code, but these are all the code that are available from Apple documentation. The only thing I changed is just a note table view and also some comments. Okay, one more thing to do for our main view controller is that we also need to refactor our code for the data source, because we used just to hard code the value for how many rows we're to return from to our table view, but now we use a fetch result controller and we refactor out to use it. Just install the code. So, because in this fetch result will give us how many sections we have in our data model, so we'll just return that as a number of sections. We also have rows. Of course, we want to show our cells. Okay. Comment on this line, because we now have the text. We don't have the title yet, so we just have the timestamp. So let's just do that. Okay. So we have our main view controller, and then go to the new node view controller. The same thing we're doing is adding some property from here. We also need to satisfy our compiler to import whatever framework. The reason why we want a node here is that because we want to create a node, we basically want to create a new node from our core data model. And also we need to have a managed object content to work with that. But how can we get our managed object contents? Remember that we, in our main view controller, already have our managed object context. So we just pass that to our new node view controller. So here we have a prepare for segue. We already refer to our new node view controller, so we just pass that. Managed object context, self managed context. Good. Of course, we can go back to our new node view controller. We need to initialize our node. So here. Okay, initialize that. Make sure we pull it. So when we need to create a new object, we basically just call that from the entity description. We just give the name and pass the context. And this is a very, very interesting thing. So because we're going to create a node, but we never create a subclass for node, this is thanks to Core that auto-generated the subclass for us, as long as we define that in our data model. Okay? Then we need to show that in our label. And at some point, we might want to save our nodes into our coded model. So we also want to have some code to handle that. Submit. Just comment on this line. We might also discard that. We don't need that. Okay. Make sure we call that in the method that in charge of the navigation. So when we tap save, we'll save our node. When we tap cancel, we'll tap discard. Okay, that's fine. So we'll go back to the view. Oh, we forgot to initialize our fetch result controller. So we'll put that into our view wheel load. Will appear. You can also put it in view the load, but since we need to, every time we go back to the main view controller, we want it to refresh. So just put over here. Okay. So now let's run that. Okay, so we have the app. We create a new node. This is live generated the data, the date object for us. We tap save. It will save to our core data model, the local device. Make it more. If we just turn off our app and put it again, it's there. I want you to know that how does this come out? Because in here, once we create a new node, we can directly set properties into this object because this is actually set into the managed object context. So the managed object context, this is handling everything for us. Okay, but we're not stopped there. So in here, we still not able to see the detail in this view. So we can go to our edit node, the controller. And for properties here, we do the same thing to pass the context here. Just name it as a destination. object context. Okay. Just pass it from our main controller. There's one important thing from here is that since we will tap each row, so basically when we tap the row, we'll know which object we're referring to. So in our main view controller, we're going to also refactor our delegate method. So just delete that. So here is we asked directly from our fetch result controller and pass index pass, tell us what node are we referring to, and then we just pass that node to our segue. So this is where we pass into this method and into the standard parameters, and this will be the same that we have from here. So now we can just cast that. And it's the answer this condition. Right. Good. So we have our node, we have how we'll have our managed object context, and then we have PC. Because we'll have that object, we'll set up our data label. So we call it immediate node. We also want to update our time because we can actually update, we have a button in the view that we can update the date. So make sure we are able to follow that. And we did tap our update button. Finally, when the app is about to disappear, and our view will disappear, we just save our manager context because we think that we want to save it. So let's see what happens. Same object, tap it, you see those data. We tap it, we can update that. Go back to our view. Oh, we might miss something. Let's see what happens.
Will disappear. Check that.
Which one?
Will disappear.
Update it. That works. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Color beer works.
Yeah, so you have super. Yeah, got it. Great, thank you. So to make it looks better, I also want to swipe to delete our view. So just delete our node. So we can do this. So once you implement this method, you can be able to delete a row. We'll also find which node to delete and delete that node, and then save the contents. So here, so we run that. You just swipe it, delete it. So now this app is fully backed by core data. So how many time we spent? Like 12 minutes or 15 minutes? Okay. So this is how easy it is. You can implement core data into a project from scratch. But we're not stopped there. Remember, we still want to have some title in our node. So this will involve some topic about changing the data model between versions. What do I mean? So if I go to the model, right now we only have time and the type is date. If we try to add a new attribute, for instance, let's just call it title, and define it as a string. Normally, if this involves too much change for the model, next time we launch an app, the app might crash from launch. But now, in the current version of Core Data, you might be able to just start your app, and Apple might give you an easy migration, lightweight migration for you, so you don't have to do anything. But if you want to make it to be more explicitly, you can use those two properties in your NS persistent storage description and set it true. So there was explicit tell core data to migrate the store automatically for you. And also we'll try to infer the mapping module automatically. But to be able to do a lightweight migration, that Apple might give you some criteria if you meet that criteria, then it can do the automatic migration. So to refer to all those criteria, you can just refer to the Apple documentation. But normally, since we have a simple project, this should be just fine. So finally, just do a very quick refinement for a project to make sure that we can have our node put in a project. We just place text node. Also need to have the IB outlet to do that. Got the same line here and back to our edit node controller. So we have an outlet to connect with the object in our storyboard. So now we can have a node text field connected. In our edit node controller, we can also connect our title text field. So now we can go back to our code. But one more thing. So since we will show two lines of text field, so to the table of results, so we need to change our style. So just to use a subtitle style, so to see two lines of label. We'll do a quick revision for our self-row. So here, if we have note in our title, we just unwrap it and show it. If there's not, we just show 3 dash. If there's no value to it. We'll also show in the detail label. And a new note. Okay. We'll uncomment this line because now we have our text. We might have a text in our text view. So if it's there, so we just save note with that text. Finally, in our edit node controller, we also need to set up our text label. Text view. So I'm going to update that into. Also want to save if we go back to our main view, so just set that here. Okay, now let's run that. So those tools, we don't create a name, so it's a 3 dash. So you can create that like a world. Save it, see it. Let's type in one more. CocoaHeads. You can also go into one of it and just type, change it. We'll also change to our model, to our technical table. We'll also change our time, so it will reflect the latest time. Since if you sort in table view, it will go back to the table view. So this is how easy it is. You can create a node app without core data, but implement code later in just about 20 minutes. So let's have a recap. So by those live code, I hope that it's easier learning code for our core data. We also show some simple API that can use in their live demo code. I hope that it feels more straightforward rather than tedious. And since we're also cover a little bit about migration, so that you can feel free to play more with core data and worry less about the crash if you change the data model between versions. So here are some resources that you might want to refer to later. Because everything we covered today is just because we won't have too much time to cover everything. But later, if you want to learn more about core data, these are the great resources we have. But first, this is our live demo code that I put to the GitHub. You can download later. I'll also share this keynote to our CocoaHeads GitHub group. The next thing is Apple developer documentation about core data. This documentation is very concise, very easy to read, and if you just started with core data, this is the one to go. But if you want to have a more detailed knowledge about how the core data behave, the third thing is the core data programming guide. This also comes from Apple, so you can refer to the most relevant information about core data. Or if you want to learn core data by instruction, like videos. So here is a very great resources about core data. It's core data for iOS and macOS enterprise developers by John Bott. So this video is available on lynda.com. And also, finally, if you want to read books, there's also great books called Core Data from lbjc.io by Florian Kugler and Daniel Eggert. So those are great resources. All right, so that's all for today's talk. Some simple techniques to get started with core data. I hope you like it. And if you are an experienced user for core data, I hope today's talk gives you just a fresh. If you just get started with core data or never used core data before, I hope this talk can get you started. Okay, my name is Zhang Jingyue, Knight. Thank you very much.